Yeah, and as so welcome to this live online conversation on Creative Pragmatics. It's a great pleasure to see all of you here, and it's also wonderful to be able to celebrate finally the book. It's here, the actual material object does something when you hold it in your hands and things like that. So yeah, Mike, you have it as well. We have a wonderful program today where we have some of the contributors to the book, and we will be sharing the ideas in the book and also discussing a little bit more openly and freely what this notion of creative pragmatics is and what it might be able to do for us, both in relation to science education and also education in a broader sense. And one of the things that we're trying to do with the book is to take some of the insights and the legacies from science and technology studies and from art and design, and to actually put them to work in relation to education, to educational thinking and educational practice, and with a focus on STEM education. We are very pleased to have with us tonight for this opening session, Andrew Pickering. Andrew has written the foreword to the book, and Andrew is personally one of my gurus from the SDS field. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Andrew. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for doing the foreword for the book, and we look forward to having your short opening intervention into the conversation. But we also have with us other wonderful gurus and nice people. We have with us Michael Shanks, who is a co-editor of the book, and will also be talking about his perspective on the book and about knowing in a complex world, which is one of the themes and concepts that we engage with in the book. We have with us Mads Hyby, who will be talking about learning in the making on the basis of experiences with maker movement and Fab Lab. We have Maiken Vestenholm Svendsen, who will be talking about assessment as performative educational practice, also a contributor to the book. And we have with us also Michael Bell, an architect professor from Columbia, and also a longtime collaborator with particularly Michael, and who will be talking to us about Design Studio for Active Learning. Now, one of the things that we have decided to do is to make this ultra short. So we're hoping we're going to have like nice 5 minute presentations, interventions, you can say, and see these as appetizers, right? I know that we're approaching dinner time, so this is kind of just a little appetizer. And then the main course, of course, is the book. And then it's also the kind of conversations and the network that we are also building while doing this. So just the short appetizers, and then hopefully we will also be able to engage in a little bit of more interactive dialogue with across the contributors. And there are more contributors to the book here as well tonight. So please also, for all of you who have contributed but haven't been put on the talk list yet, please do join the talk list in the round table. I'm going to not make this too long, so I would like very much to say welcome to you, Andrew Pickering, and tell us why this book now.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Hello, hello everyone. It's very nice of. I don't know what that is on the screen, but never mind. It's very nice of Connie to ask me to say a few words about creative pragmatics, and I'm very happy to do so. My way into this is to ask, just what is science? I can think of two answers. One is that it's a solid body of knowledge that we try to transmit to the next generation in teaching. How to do maths, solve equations, generally how to understand the world and how technologies work. That's fine and it's important. It's actually how I learned STEM subjects years ago and I enjoyed it a lot. It eventually led me to a PhD in particle physics, of all things, heavy duty STEM. But it presents one problem. It fosters the idea that the world itself is made of finite problems that we can calculate our way through. And unfortunately, that isn't the case. In the real world, our students are going to be faced by endless complexity and wicked problems, situations without unique, calculable, and definitive solutions. How do we equip our students for that? This gets us to the second view of science, which my own field of research, Science and Technology Studies, STS, has been building up for maybe 50 years now, maybe even longer. This is a view of science as practice, science as the work of finding out about and getting to grips with the world. Science as a social, material, and conceptual trip into the unknown. This, I think, is the sort of vision that needs somehow to be translated into pedagogy for an open-ended future. And that translation is what Creative Pragmatics for Active Learning aims to do. And this is where its importance lies. The book combines philosophical reflections on the complexity of the modern world with a wide variety of case studies of pedagogies appropriate to that. And these studies are extremely valuable, I think. It's easy enough to talk about uncertainty and wicked problems in the abstract. But to move forward, we need these concrete examples of pedagogy in action to show us what teaching that recognizes complexity can look like. The trick, as I understand it, is to teach STEM subjects as integral to constructive and exploratory projects in which students can find out for themselves what finding out is like. And no doubt the contributors can say that better than I just did. But that's my take on the book. If I can add a quick suggestion, it will be this. Creative Pragmatics, the book, is about the form that teaching might take, how to go about it. But it's also worth thinking about content and substance, about just what we teach our students. If we're preparing students for a complex world, maybe we should also teach them something about the sciences of complexity and fields like cybernetics, or at least my version of that. And my field, STS, has generated many fascinating empirical and theoretical studies of science as constructive practice. Maybe students would find those studies interesting and useful to learn about too. I think they would. Anyway, that's a thought about an imaginary and content-oriented second volume of Creative Pragmatics. But I should finish by saying how important I think this first volume is. It's a major and key contribution to new pedagogical thought and practice. And that was probably about 4 minutes, so that's all I got to say. Thank you
That's
for
what's
listening.
That's wonderful, Andrew. Thank you so much. And I love how you call out to the second volume already. We're probably going to try to lure you in as a contributor in some way
Ah,
further to that as
okay, sign
well.
me up.
That's great. Thank you so much. And such wonderful, wonderful highlights. The pedagogy for an open future. I really love that one. And I also really applaud the idea of the studies in STS actually being the content of a science education. So yeah, so all clapping is going on around here. So thank you. And actually, I'm going to pass the word on now to Michael Shanks because you are going to actually continue, you could say, this in this line of thinking that Andrew has started up with. So, Michael, knowing in a complex world.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to just share an anecdote, and it's what's going on with me at the moment. I'm at the beginning of term here at Stanford, and I've long contributed to the Science Technology Society program. It's quite fascinating. One of the features of the university here, Stanford, is, we're in Silicon Valley. And I also, here am I in Humanities House. I actually decided a little while ago that it's important to get to know our students because they aren't anything like what I was as a student. And so I'm in a house here with 120 undergraduates, and more than 75% of them are STEM subjects, STEM majors. That's the characteristic of so many of our universities now. And Stanford, frankly, takes really quite a conservative view of pedagogy. But they're open, and particularly I find the students are open. Now, yeah, this is anecdotal. On the other hand, I must have talked to around about 3,000 students in my classes just in the last 4 or 5 years around what we can do to open up what they still call STEM subjects to something more. And that's where our concept, creative pragmatics, it's kind of abstract, but once you put the two together, pragmatics, we get on with stuff, we do stuff, and it's creative. And this is immensely appealing. Never mind Silicon Valley ideologies. Well, we should. They do, and they think about it a lot. Exactly. And this is where our integrating synthetic concept really flies because it's arts and humanities, science and technology. Let me just share with you, picking up actually what you've asked us to do, Andrew, which is, okay, what do we teach? We've got pedagogies, we've got design thinking, we've got the Roskilde model, we've got active learning. We have immense experiences in and tried and tested methods, pedagogies. That's why, again, I think our concept is so pertinent, so relevant, because it pulls it together, synthetic. But let me just share some thoughts in classes that I'm doing at the moment. I'm doing two classes. Let me show you some pictures because they're kind of, so you're not just looking at me. Quickly, I'm ready to Sharon's not turned on, Connie. Can we switch sharing on? Or Gabriella? There we go. Perhaps now. Yep, there we go. Okay, you should see a nice picture of an 1844 picture by William Turner. It's in one of my classes. It's environment. It's kind of environmental humanities. We have a new school here, the School of Sustainability, funded by a local multi-billionaire. Oh my God, how these things cut all sorts of different ways. John Durr. Anyway, and they have, yes, promoted, embraced environmental humanities, and this is good. Then it's like up to us to step to the mark with something to offer rather than just tokenism. And this image is from a discussion I had this week with my class. We have small group classes. I like conversation. I also like studio. They kind of need to be small and intense as well, based, I think, around conversation. But just this is something that they instantly related to. And it's from history, of course, the history of art, kind of. And here we've got Turner, exploding, literally in many ways, the conventions, the aesthetic conventions. So we're in environmental aesthetics here. The aesthetic conventions associated with landscape, with place, and also with architecture and industry. All in one image. 1844, it's towards the end of his career. And my goodness, is he not getting experimental? Many of his contemporaries thought he was absolutely barking mad. They thought he was senile because he painted like this. But actually, what he's doing is experimenting precisely with, well, something that was at the heart of the development of complexity theory, the weather, atmospheres. And so items like this can lead us into exploring exactly what we are saying we need to explore, a world of complexity.
Great. Thank
And we
you,
can do it
Michael.
in,
And those were
yeah.
your 5 minutes. I'm going to be ruthless. I'm sorry, but that was a good ending. So, exploring complexity as one of the lines that we are actually really exploring unfolding in creative pragmatics. And I'm sure you can share some of the other things that you were planning to say to us in the
There's
further
always more
conversation.
to say in all of
Yes,
this, isn't there, Connie? You're
exactly.
absolutely right. But I made my point. Arts, humanities, science, and tech can easily be integrated. And yes, under umbrella concept, complexity.
Great. Thank you
There we
so
go.
much. And
Let's keep
I had
going. Let's keep
Yes,
going.
lovely. Thank you. So now I'm going to call out on Mess Hubby. Mess, are you there? You are now being admitted. So Mess Hubby is an associate professor at Roskilde University and a computer scientist who works very much in the kind of maker fab lab sphere. So Mess, are you here? You're here and you're ready to share with us under the header of learning through making. And we do not hear you, Miss.
Can you hear me now? Yes, and you
Yes.
cannot see me
Yes.
for some reason. I have a fresh computer, so that video now you should also be able to see me there, and you can see the screen, right?
Yes.
All
Great.
right, I'm ambitious. I'm gonna do a cute little speed run of some of the progress in this chapter, or how we work with this chapter, and hopefully get some kind of small bits and pieces out of what was our curiosity of this chapter.
And
But
as
just
you've seen, I'm going to be ruthless with time, so you just
yes, be
try and do
ruthless.
that.
I'm gonna be quick and speedy and yeah.
Go
So
for it.
just to start for it, for me it was really interesting to work across a lot of people to write this chapter. It was makers, people who work at the Fab Lab at RUC, and also researchers at RUC that's been working on this paper. And it's been very much about connecting with the core of what it means to actually have an everyday practice of making and learning in a Fab Lab. And our starting point was how do makers make? That was our question we wanted to explore. And we did that through mapping out a lot of manifestos around the maker scene, figuring out what are they talking about, what are the discussions, what are the themes, and try to map out some crude elements of what is at play here. What is it that actually the manifestos and the maker scene actually see themselves when they do making? And there's one part that is the freedom to hack, create, fix, ownership. And this part is very much under the parole. If you can't open it, you don't own it. And a good example of that is my old grandmother's ghetto blaster that I inherited from her. And I looked up the manual, and on page 3, there was a diagram of how all the parts worked in this ghetto blaster. And if you look at today's technology, that's not the world we live in today. So making and the maker scene is very much a countercurrent to passive electronic consumerism and how we kind of approach technology today. But then there's the other part, the experimentation, the learning, the knowledge sharing. How does that work within the making and the maker scene? Loads of people have been talking about this. There's loads of methods, diagrams. They're all some kind of 5-step model, some iteration, some agility, some dynamics, some open up and close down. But that feels like when, for the people working in the makerspace and doing, making, tinkering, exploring, they become very much formalized ideals, and actually reality in the making is actually very messy and very intuitive. And the best way for me to define this is that the idea of refinement is not really present, it's much more about exploration. So what is this chapter about? It's about 6 propositions for what it means to make by makers, for makers, in a makerspace, from the perspective of voices of them. And I'm just going to quickly glance over them. It's not about the solution, it's about exploring the problem, questioning the foundation of the problem. There's no fixed recipe for success. It's about talking around, mixing all the steps, doing everything at once, jumping back and forth randomly. It's about thinking through the material. You build something, you look at it, you refine it, you go there, you play around with it, you do it, but it's through the material, it's through doing something and understanding it. And then it's explorative and it branches out in different branches and different tangents. And that is the beauty of making and playing in a maker space. And all of this ties into how integrated making and learning really is. It's just that doing and making and learning is actually overlapping in so many ways. Lots of discussion on that. And that is where, for example, knowledge sharing has become so interesting in making, because quite often the culture is that you just share the knowledge. And that means somebody else steals your idea. Sometimes feels like they stole it, but we give it away. Somebody steals it, they do something with it. I steal back their version of it. And then we kind of share the knowledge and the learning through these kind of detours of throwing ideas around. And finally, in this chapter, we had a good discussion about the accessibility and how it is an ongoing endeavor. And there's some huge challenges in it within makerspaces that they quickly close themselves around a culture and an idea. And there's an ongoing process of saying, how can making also be something that is more translucent, opens up for more diversity, both from kind of institution or clubhouse or makerspace as a physical space, but also in the way we enable other people to explore technology and kind of lower the bar of what it needs to do tech. So those are the 6 very short bits, those
Perfect. Thank you,
propositions.
Mats. That was perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your chapter and the principles of how we can learn through making and what the essentials basically of making is. This is wonderful for us to take that into the further exploration of how creative pragmatics can be used in education and maybe also beyond. So now I'm going to pass the word on to Maiken Vestenholm Svendsen, who is going to talk to us about performativity in assessment and how you can use the principle of performativity in relation to assessment in education. So Maiken, please share with us affect-sensitive learning.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we can also see your notes.
Perfect.
It's one thing,
You
though.
can also see the notes. Okay, it's good because I made a manuscript in order to stay with the time. Is it better now?
Yes, it's great now.
Okay,
Good.
perfect. Okay, I'm going to look at the manuscript now. But yes, thank you, Connie. First, I would also just like to say that it's an honor for being able to contribute to this book. I did it together with my co-supervisor, who is also here today. This is Dorte Moskær Larsen. And you, Connie, is also my supervisor. So a lot of these ideas that we talk about every day is somehow worked into this chapter as well. So this chapter means a lot to me. I did it in the very beginning of my PhD journey. And it was not only the first encounter for me to academia, but it was also coming from a background within mathematics and physics, the first like real encounter to performative ideas of science and knowledge. So yeah, but as you said, our chapter is called Summative STEM Competence Assessment. And in that chapter, we talk about a concept of affect-sensitive learning. And yeah, so it grew actually from a practical curiosity dealing with how to assess competencies within mathematics, which is in Danish curricula described as something that's acted. So we were wondering how assessment could become a part of science in the making instead of being seen as a fixed endpoint. And when we say science in the making, we of course draw on your work, Andrew, because you reminds us that science is not just a collection of facts, but it's a performative practice, a dance of agency, you call it. And it's a dance of agency between humans, materials, instruments, and also scientific ideas, of course. And we argue that this dance is also a part of what's going on in the classroom as well. So where we have students, we have teachers, we also have artifacts who perform small science every day, very small versions of science, you could say. But in most educational systems, assessment happens after this dance. So, and it is seen more as a final judgment. And as Dorte and I describes in the chapter, we see that this has some consequences. So, summative assessments, the assessments after teaching, you could say, often values knowledge that is fixed. And in doing so, we risk overseeing or overlooking these competencies that are unfolded as a part of doing science. So, secondly, we also see that the summative assessment also adds pressure, has an affective dimension, you could say so, because it adds pressure to the students because they are experiencing assessments as something that where they need to perform, and it's something where they are judged. Yeah. But within the mindset of creative pragmatics, we begin to see assessment in a bit more different way as a part of the ongoing practice of learning instead of a mirror of what has been learned already. So what we see is that or when we see assessment in that way, it gains a new potential to tune into the living nature of competencies as they emerge in doing science. So we had the possibility to explore this in the Lab STEM project, which forms also the basis for our chapter. And we had to explore this idea with some Danish teachers in primary school. And what we see here in the picture, we are looking at a 7th grade who are visiting a hydroelectric power plant. And they were tasked as an assessment in the end to build their own hydroelectric power plant. And we saw them measuring, we saw them calculating, and we also saw them discuss. But more importantly, they did science in the making instead of just representing science as something they've learned before being assessed. Yeah, so when we saw that, we could see STEM competencies emerge in action. We saw problem solving, collaboration, we saw communication, and we also saw critical thinking. And this was all strongly intertwined with an affect dimension of curiosity. We saw pride. We also saw a bit of time pressure also, and but also just joy and shared laughter between these kids. And one of the kids who usually sees himself as someone who's not good at math, we saw him calculating flow and pressure while he was building his own model. So something that we would maybe not see if it was a strict assessment where some nervous feelings could maybe obscure the picture. So this was, of course, mainly science in the making, also with some science as a fact, you could say, and both, of course, have a place in education. But to respect both, we also need to assess both in order to the teaching to the test problem that we also all know about. And we must pay attention not only to what students know, but also how they come to know it. And that is exactly what we call in the chapter affect sensitive assessment. So in that sense, assessment becomes less about extracting results and more about participating responsibly in a learning environment, in an assessment learning environment, you could call it maybe. So I guess our invitation today, Dorte and I, is to imagine assessment not only as something that is a part of the ending or is the ending, but it's a part of the creative and pragmatic process of science in the making.
Great. Thank you, Maiken.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And this picking up assessment and the performativity that you potentially can also design with in assessment is a key thing. So this alignment that you're also bringing forward between what goes on in educational practice and actually how and what you assess, right?
Yes.
So that's a very important thing if you want actual change to
Yeah,
happen.
and how to assess complexity, right? So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you, Maiken. And
welcome.
I will now like to pass the word on to Michael Bell, who will be presenting his and Chris Ford's thoughts on Design Studio for Active Learning. So Michael Bell, who is a
Uh,
professor at Columbia in architecture. Yeah.
Hey, good morning. Is the screen sharing working properly before I
Yes.
start? Okay. Yes, this is a joint chapter by Chris Ford and myself. I won't go into the bios, but Chris and I both, although Chris has a recent PhD in mechanical engineering through Stanford CDR, he's also an architect and a former tenured professor of architecture. Chris and I worked closely with Michael Shanks over the years, and the chapter was we were asked to discuss the role of Design Studio in active learning. In Architecture Studio, one thing we took on was trying to say this might not be what you think it is. The professional quality of architecture schools intersects engineering, it intersects the sciences, it intersects economics, development, art, Turner paintings, as Michael Shanks showed. But the milieu of architecture studios today, it varies a great deal, and we took some time to explain that. So it's worth looking at the chapter that way. Studios might take on work that's infrastructural, immense in scale, socially important, such as capping the Cross Bronx Expressway. In my own studios, they might verge deeply into engineering, trying to create a translucent polymer beam that can be both structure and daylighting at the same time. So a kind of process of quantification, engineering, design, aesthetics. Studios intersect contemporary issues when they need to. In this case, that's a COVID clinic designed for rapid deployment during the COVID crisis, and students getting deeply into questions about air pressure, flow, hydraulics of water and air, etc. But other contemporary questions come up as well, and they force the expansion of what you think a small group of designers can take on. The advent of the electric car, the changing of 120,000 gasoline stations into possible electric charging stations, what that means for a user, what that means sociologically, but then transformations in a vehicle, what that means for the user in the vehicle, or massive questions about terrain. Here's a student attempting to understand autonomous transportation and the use of a satellite network, what that does to what we thought of the desert. Students in architecture have and are often agile with immense data sets. So a student, instead of designing a future fueling station in one of my courses, is instead here mapping out different aspects of the entire North American continent, from land cover to fueling stations to infrastructure to freeways. Another group of students imagining differences in transportation times around the Bay Area. I'm a graduate of Berkeley and used to teach at Berkeley, but what it could mean to the way distance and time is organized. Different vehicles, different users, different techniques. I won't speak for Chris too carefully here, but we discussed this issue endlessly. Chris's website, InfraX, goes into some of these things, and Chris is quite an expert on histories of infrastructure, failures in infrastructure, and how one conceptualizes the user in the midst of large-scale infrastructure. This is a giant leap from being trained as an architect into thinking about vast amounts of territory. Students at GSAP are trained to critique forms of infrastructure, architecture, design, history, theory, art. But more broadly speaking, we frequently are involved in critiquing and trying to estimate who has the power to alter territory. So you see Michel Foucault popping out in the middle of there. Foucault is a huge part of our history, theory, and frankly, design sequences. But we do go into art still very carefully. Edward Hopper's gas station from 1940, a Burger King transferred into a Tesla charging station more recently, or even everyday news in the 1979, in particular, the advent of the mass truck stop in North America, in the United States, versus Warren Buffett buying Flying J truck stops more recently. But on the other side of this, students in architecture studios are frequently asked to have deep forms of empathy for the people they design for. That's a Center for Design Research question. One of my students recently took figures from the news and attempted to model their faces like a sculptor using three-dimensional software and project their pictures onto the three-dimensional. He claimed it allowed them to get much closer to the user. In my own practice, all of these questions come up. And what I briefly show here is a brand new book that was being worked on contemporaneous to the chapter with Chris, Connie, Michael, and your book. But it's a book called 8 Minutes and 20 Seconds, Housing After Banking. It attempts to imagine a conflation of two huge forces. One of them is possible automation of labor. The other is emerging questions of climate change. And a question that, as we go through the book, begins to suggest that the world that we have known the last 50 years, in particular since 1970, from infrastructure to architecture to users to design, is an aberration in the real history of human settlement. In that period of time, the cost to produce photovoltaic energy has dropped from $77 per watt to less than 50 cents per watt. If we go forward to 2050, the potential dramatic change in the power grid, if we really do switch to renewables as we appear to be heading despite current events, would dramatically alter the map of the United States and of course the world. So as we went through this work, and this really affects all of my teaching and the way we structure studios and why it's been so interesting to be around Michael Shanks, Connie, the CDR, is looking at things like what did construct the last half century. Dramatic uses of household debt, even in the 21st century, a dramatic increase in central banks holding debt, fixing markets, fixing housing markets, fixing 9/11, fixing 2008, fixing markets around COVID. If you look at development and creativity in architecture, if you look on the left, it's California. That little blue part of that graph is the part of a housing cost that is the building. In California, about 77% of housing cost is land. Household net worth and volatility sits the middle.
Michael, sorry, I'm going to be as ruthless with you as I have with the other.
No, I'm actually almost done. That's it. Where this is heading, Connie, is just simply, and I can stop sharing, is to say that design studios are constructing themselves around some version of what we consider to be the real. And what I would argue is that the real, as we've known it, and the forms of power that construct it, are far more volatile and fragile than they appear, meaning that your book and these ideas about creativity and pragmatics are absolutely on the mark, and convening people that can do that and imagine what it is that constructs the real is absolutely essential. So, and I think Chris is somebody who's deeply creative about this. Thank you very much for the extra minute. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. And this is also a wonderful segue, I think, actually into our conversation, because that's where we are now, right? That we have a little bit of time actually to share and to comment across the chapters, and also to ask or comment from the people who are here who haven't spoken yet. And I would like to mention also that we have heard here some samples, a little appetizer from some of the book chapters, but there are more people present here who have also contributed, who actually also have chapters in the book. And I would like to just name them as well, so that we get just a tiny idea of that. And first, I would like to mention that Chunfang Zhu is here as well. Chunfang is a co-editor of the book as well. And Tamara Carlton was also here. She left again, but she's also, of course, she's one of the, we've been 4 people working on the book. And I would like to mention in that aspect also Gabrielle, who has been invaluable in also making this book a reality. So thank you so much for that to you. And then I would also like to mention Thomas Elbrechtsen, who is here. Thomas, maybe you can also just flag up that you have written a book, a chapter also to the book, together with Karina Kjær on teacher professional development. And I would like to mention also Katrine Bergqvist. Maybe Katrine, you can also just flag up your hand. You have written a contribution together with Rie Troelsen about learning environments, which actually continues very nicely from what you have been speaking about, Michael. Am I missing somebody? I think I've covered. No, Gide as well. Hi, Gide. Yes, cheers and happy birthday the day before yesterday. Gide has written a chapter also on large-scale institutional systemic development and how you can work with that from a creative, pragmatic approach. And I think that's it. Maybe just mention also that Nicholas Petfield is here as well. You have also been a core part of the development of the Makerspace chapter. So thank you all for being here, and also, of course, welcome to the people who are here without having actually contributed to the book yet. I'm sure you have contributed in some way or other with ideas. Now, some of the things that have been flagged up, and I think where we left off with Michael, is complexity, systems, territory, and this notion of what the real is. I think that is a really it's both a super big question, but it's also maybe a very emancipatory question to be asking oneself: what is the real? This is one of the things that Michael Shanks flagged up at a recent conference we were at. We were also promoting and presenting the book Creative Pragmatics and the ideas there. And one of the questions that you posed, Michael, or one of the things that you said basically was that there is no real ground of science for science education to stand on. So science in science education is sometimes presented as something that is fixed, static, that it doesn't move. But the point that we make in the book and that you were flagging up at the recent conference was that, that's actually not the case. Science is actually also fluid and dynamic and emergent and contingent. So it develops, it moves. And that, I think, that understanding, that comprehension perhaps is also what when Andrew, when you started, when you ended off saying we have to talk about what the content is, that's actually part of the content as well, right? I mean, what are the kinds of sciences? What is the comprehension both of reality and of science that we are asking, inquiring into, interrogating? So just a little response from me. I would love to hear some more perspectives, both from people who have already spoken, but also from people who are participating and haven't said anything yet. So tell me what you think.
Connie, one super short comment. Michael Shanks has spent a great deal of time around my design studios and has seen value in the idea of a design studio. I think what's often not been evident is how much design studios are struggling to broaden the team. We have a lot of history theory and we have a lot of engineering, but we don't have what's in creative pragmatics. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that design studios are flourishing. They're utterly struggling to try to achieve some of the things that you guys are opening up, in particular, Andrew Pickering and yourself, Michael, everybody here. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Michael. That's wonderful to hear. It'd be great to pursue that further to see how we can actually do these kind of cross-pollinations, right? Gide, yeah.
Thank you for the cross pollinating metaphor here, because I'm so happy that we can do this book launch today in this way. And I would very much like for us to discuss what do we do with this fluidity of reality in this very fixed and scientific world that we are actually working into and trying to opening up to when we do science education research. I can find it a bit complex to actually stand on this ground of creative pragmatics with my colleagues.
Yeah. So who's going to take that responsibility?
We will together, of course, but it can be hard to speak in. I'm not saying that we're speaking to deaf ears, as we say in Danish, but in another way, it can be hard to argument our methodology here. Am I the only one that can that sense this?
Let's hear some perspectives on this. Andrew, I saw you were leaning forward. Maybe we could ask what your response is to this.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can teach the traditional sciences as part of kind of exploratory projects, maybe kind of decenter the science a bit as part of, finding out about the unknown. The other thing you could try doing is what I was saying in my last paragraph. There are sciences that show students a world of endless becoming, things like complexity theory, cellular automata, little models that have got fixed rules, but you can't predict what they're going to do next. Show those to students, say, try imagining the world is like that. Or, of course, from a self-centered perspective, there's an enormous literature on uh, in STS on the construction of science, the open-endedness of the whole business, long discussions of ontology, Whitehead, Latour, possibly me. There's all sorts of ways you can contextualize what science is for the benefit of the students, I should think. I've taught courses. Yeah, you could do that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good. Michael Shanks, do you want to say something as well, perhaps?
The thinking behind me showing a picture of by William Turner was to show, and Michael, you were showing this. We can ground what yes is an abstract synthetic set of concepts toolkit, but we can ground it in very, very, I think, tangible. I hesitate to call them case studies. The arts I find are very rich here because they're rich. But the one that I picked up on was weather, which, my goodness, who's going to, not get the fact that weather is not something, it is a complex system, and it's an Earth system. But it is also something that people talk about on a day-to-day basis and write about and picture and photograph, sunsets, everything. That sort of, I was earlier just thinking of, again, the practice, well tried and tested practices, such as, it started in Finland, didn't it? At least they called it phenomena-based learning. And that is absolutely, start with water, start with weather. I think it's just a case of our pedagogical freedom, imagination, to go there and just pick up on the good examples that we know do work.
I think also I agree, and I would like to actually call out to, not necessarily calling on, Mikael, who's a chemist and who is also a participant in this session here. One of Mikael is a chemistry associate professor and has been working as head of studies for the chemistry program at STU for a long time at the university, and has kind of crossed over and is now engaging more and more into some of the science education research discussions that we have. And one of the things that I at least have learned from the conversations that we have had over the past 5 years is for example, that data science is changing science. It's changing the content of science as well. I mean, this is one of the things that Mikael has pointed out. So I think that to respond to your question, Gita, maybe having showing how contemporary science is also in flux and is also changed, is affected by technological developments. Those are cases, I would say, that help perk a little bit into this to this the contingency of scientific knowledge. But Mikael, would you like, I saw that you unmuted, so I take that as a kind of consent to say something.
I was just being prepared in case you asked.
Yeah, what's your point of view on this, Mikael? Because you're a scientist, right? But you're also an educationalist.
Yes. Well, yes. Well, disciplines are changing, and the changes are driven by what's happening around us in the world, and certainly data science and data driven. One or the other thing is is very much emerging, and so we're actually also talking about data-driven educational development. So not just so actually using data also to change educations and drive changes in education. But you're absolutely right that and we're talking a lot about transdisciplinarity or co-disciplinarity, but I would also say that a thing like data science is also getting into the core chemistry discipline. So, for example, for educational purposes, we are working on including more data science into a general chemistry education. And of course, to put in things in an education, you need to take other things out, and we have to have a discussion about what of the traditional core chemistry topics do we need to take out to make room for data science, and that's going to be difficult, but it's an example of, I would say, how a discipline changes and evolves, and the core content of a discipline also changes from the influx of what's happening around us.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mikael. And for that, for me, this is it's a really good example of how at the intersections and at the conversations between different disciplines, maybe different knowledge traditions, and how having the conversation and actually learning from each other is something that happens in a situated way, in a pragmatic way, and as a creative co-constructive activity as well. So I think that the kind of negotiation that you're asking to get in, how do you respond, how do you work with this methodology, is actually about being in the process of doing it, right? And I think, and this is where I feel also that some of the cybernetics that Andrew Pickering was mentioning at the beginning, and which you have also written about in a wonderful book about cybernetics and the British version or your version of cybernetics, this kind of the making the systemic development and the kind of response continuously to what is going on. That's how I see our center at FNUC at the University of Southern Denmark, where we are at the Faculty of Science. We sometimes think of ourselves also as an intervention into educational and institutional practice. And that is actually very much informed by something like creative pragmatics, because it's not about there is no, like what we were saying before, there's not one place to judge what is right or wrong from, because it's a negotiation, and it's a materially and a social negotiation, you could say, and so it's complicated and it's negotiated, but it is also something that we have a lot of. There's a lot of literature. There's a lot of traditions that we can lean into, and I have to agree and flag up also that STS is a really valuable resource for these kinds of negotiations. I mean, if you want to talk to scientists about science, then referring to empirical studies of how science actually happens is a very good starting point, I would say. Michael Bell, yeah.
Well, I would just quickly add there's not time in 5 minutes, but we had a sidebar discussion. Connie had sent me notes about getting prepared and brought up cybernetics and Andrew's work. But I had referenced back on the side a recent publication by William Nordhaus, the climate economist at Yale, Nobel Prize winning, who spent his career trying to price externalities as a method of forcing the market to recognize pollution. But I brought it up because he recently, in 2015 and then again in 2021, wrote an essay titled "Are We Approaching Singularity?" It's not cybernetics, but it was a major economist asking, is singularity more than a concept? And he declared that we're not, but a massive rise in computational capacity meeting a massive decline in its price to the point where it devalues labor. I mean, a serious but arcane subject for many. But the fact that a major economist of the world would ask, is this possible, to me was an incredible harbinger of reappraising where we're at. amazing. You know, Larry Page saying that would be one thing. William Nordhaus bringing up is another. But the other side on chemistry, if you look at, we struggle with partners who former Tesla material scientists who work with us using chemically tempered glass rather than heat tempered glass. Chemically tempered glass is what's on the face of your iPhone, Gorilla Glass. But ways in which design would get into chemistry rather than received materials, ways in which design would imagine an economy that might be true in 20 years as opposed to today. I think we're in some incredibly liquid moment where what you and Michael and Tamara, et cetera, are calling for would definitely start to merge across the university. What is a design? And it would definitely erode architecture schools and urban planning schools and these disciplines that are licensed that aren't professionally capable of engaging at the level that we're imagining. To me, it's made being in architecture schools very, very limiting, frankly. Yeah.
Okay.
It's fun. I love design, but it's limiting.
Thank you. So, Michael, do you want to respond to Michael or Michael Shanks?
Yeah, one of the things that Gita, you brought up in your contribution to the book is the institutional politics, frankly, of so much of this. And my goodness, are we not being faced with wow, the amount of questioning pushback on just what we understand by science at the moment by various administrations around the world. But there's just again a little anecdote which is a little disturbing, which is that we over a number of years tried to roll out more extensive design-based learning here at Stanford. It was associated with long-running success in the School of Engineering, not as an art school, but design in a School of Engineering, which was quite unusual and extremely successful, not least because of where we are here now, and it's reaching out into business. But anyway, cut a long story short, we had all sorts of wonderful studio-based learning, models of studio-based learning. As I say, we were looking to extend it right across the campus to all subjects. And our leadership, I have to chuckle a little bit when I say that, decided that this was not possible because design-based, studio-based learning is just too expensive. Now that is coming from here, where we have serious resources. And Michael, you were flagging up issues yourself about, studio-based learning. And here we are, with a very serious issue of institutional politics and such. Now, one of the things that we targeted in the book, and I think this is something that is very much up front, we made a very deliberate strategic decision to go with ESERA as part of a European policy framework. And so this, I think, is precisely part of the pragmatics that we're talking about, and the need for us to be, savvy about the politics of science.
Good. And we are actually approaching the end of this session. So I see that Susanna, thank you. People are saying goodbye and thank you. And I think we would like to say the same. So thank you for joining. Yes. I have put in the chat a link to the book, the Springer link. And there's an open access first chapter, and there's also another open access chapter, one of the Tamara's chapters. And please reach out to us if this springs ideas, or if you want to pursue some of these ideas further. We will post this video recording also on our website. And thank you for joining, and it's been wonderful to have this discussion. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.